This is the In the Cut podcast where we dissect some of the best episodes of TV with professional writers. On today's episode, we're going to cast our ballot for Veep.
We in the cut.
Veep is an Emmy-winning HBO comedy that follows Vice President Selena and her largely incompetent staff. The satire blends social commentary and humor to portray the vain and performative side of American politics. In the pilot episode, newly elected Veep Selena is trying to give girl boss energy, but she's not the boss of anything. She's a stand-in for the president and not even good at that. She pisses off the plastics and oil industries after starting a clean jobs initiative. She makes an offensive joke at a fundraiser. She has to steal back a card after it's signed incorrectly. Despite this series of L's, she manages to come out on top thanks to a shady new staff member who makes Richard Nixon look like a Boy Scout. Full of slick comebacks and political drama, Veep will have you laughing and cringing every episode. And here to discuss all things Veep is Chicago native Rickey Larke. He just wrapped up being a supervising producer on the Peacock show Mr. Throwback with Steph Curry. Yes. That's pretty cool. I wish I could meet Steph Curry. But other than that, you worked on shows like Grownish, Keenan, Blackish. So I'm so glad you're here to talk about Veep.
Thank you for having me. Of
course. So I was really happy that you picked Veep to discuss. It's a show that I really like. I hadn't watched it in years, since it first came out. Yeah. A disclaimer, I'll tell you a little secret. I used to watch Veep at work when I was supposed to be doing my job.
Me too.
I was a graphic designer and I'd have the Photoshop open, but I'd be secretly Veep minimized in the corner watching that show. But it was so funny. And I realized rewatching the show that the pace of it is so fast. I read the pilot script too was 45 pages, which is ridiculously long for a half-hour script. So fast, they're speaking over each other. Yeah. Jokes are just dropping. So how do you think this fast-paced tone really helps build the world of the show?
Yeah, that's a great question. I must admit, when I was watching Veep also at my desk, I was working at HBO at the time. And Veep was one of the shows that I was working on, and you hit it right on the head. For a half-hour show, we would regularly see scripts come in that were 55 pages, 59 pages, 60 pages for finales. And that was, I think, because, as you can tell, Veep is so dense, right? It's a super dense show, a bunch of jokes, a bunch of point of views, all stacked on top of each other. And part of that is just giving the actors ammunition, because it's really the way in which it's shot very much, I don't want to say improv-y, but the jokes are kind of improv, very free-flowing. They'll give their actors the whole take and let them just riff and do things and go places. And to that extent, all the writers are writing a bunch of jokes so that they have a bunch of alts, so that they have a bunch of places to go, and they can let the actors kind of roam freely through that space and find the funniest stuff.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I was researching about just how the show's made. Yeah. And I was reading David Mandel, who's the second showrunner of the show after the creator left. Mm-hmm. He was saying when he took over the show, he was actually horrified by the amount of improv going on. He said he literally used the words horrified and just shocked that the actors were sort of, he said, were given free rein to do whatever they wanted to do. Sometimes the whole script would just be tossed aside and we're just gonna make stuff up. And he really did not like that. So as a comedy writer, do you appreciate improv? Do you not like it? Are you sort of either or?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the role that I inhabit, right? As the writer, I'm I really wish everyone would just read exactly what's on the script so that my showrunner boss can get exactly what he anticipated or she anticipated, right? And we also know that so much goes into the writing that sometimes is lost on others who weren't a part of that process. And just by changing a joke from it's to that's can change the through line joke that we have in 3 different acts that really tie things together. So I would say as a writer, I'm like, please at least get one exactly how it's done, and then we can play. As a director, as a audience member, I think it's really great to have improv and have that freedom to play, right? Like, it's almost like if you take it back to when you were a kid in school, the group projects you'd have to do with somebody else. Like when you actually had fun in the project with your friends, it actually was a better project. You ended up getting a better grade. It was a better product at the end. I feel like TV is the same way, right? Like when you get most of the time good-looking people having fun, being funny, it's going to translate into magic. So I believe, especially as a director, you get it a couple times, right? Exactly how it's scripted, exactly how it was intended for safety. But if you prepare well enough, you should allow opportunity to improv and to take chances and to try new things, because I guarantee you the top 10 moments of Veep or jokes weren't scripted.
Yeah, I would agree. Just even in reading the pilot and watching
the pilot,
they're very different, but I liked the filmed version better than the script, to be honest.
I also think too that like when you improv, you allow your actors to get into character. Like I feel like Julia Louis-Dreyfuss is able to get into Selena Meyer's much deeper with 7 different jokes with 4 different takes than she might be just on a scripted page, right? And as such, like that's the beauty of TV, is the characters. It's not plot driven like movies and features are. You come back each week to see these characters in different scenarios or different opportunities. And like, this is just a vehicle for allowing them to go deeper into that as the improv.
I would agree with that. So I think another part of Veep is that, like you said, there's so many jokes, but I would say it doesn't feel jokey, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So how do you think they're able to just jam pack it with so many jokes, but it doesn't feel like a typical, I would say a sitcom or network show, even though there's probably just as many, if not more, jokes per page than a traditional sitcom? Yeah,
that's a great like pick up on that. And I think, especially as a comedy writer, we learn there's 2 ways to get a laugh, or there's 3 ways to get a laugh. There's physical comedy, which is, pretty natural, Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, pants fall down stuff. There is a joke, which is a setup and a payoff. Oftentimes too, we'll hear a joke like, I was just watching The Detroiters and someone goes, they're not going to be able to get through that door. They're this, and someone goes, who even talks like that? Like, did you just say that and then say the ending of it? And it's like, the joke is really good when it's strong and it's really funny, but it can feel awkward. I think Veep really leans on the third one, which is point of view. A character's point of view of the world can be comedic without it being a joke. This is something I learned when I was at Blackish, because they would say, Diane doesn't do many jokes.
But she's hilarious.
But she's hilarious because it's all her point of view. It's her point of view of Junior being a lame and my dad being incompetent or my mom not doing this. And it's as good as blankety blank or just like da 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 da. It's you're a this, you're a that. It's her point of view is what makes it funny. Taking it back to Veep, it's the same thing. You have 3 clashing point of views in this series at all times. And this is just my opinion. I could be totally wrong. A writer could be like, that's not it. But you have 3 clashing point of views. It's the point of view of the person who wants to do good in government and wants to be good at their job. It's the point of view of the people who are there just for the pursuit of power and spotlight. And then the other people who are just dumbasses, And those point of views are all in conflict with each other. So that, I think, is why they're able to bring a lot of comedy in the dialogue without it being long setups, 3 couplet setups, and things that take a lot of time, right? Like, it's point of view, and then them being in clash with each other is the comedy.
Yeah, there's so many great one-liners, but they deliver it, like you said, not in a jokey way. It's just how that character would be, like when Selena is talking about wearing her glasses when she says there are wheelchairs for the eyes. Like, that's so funny to me, but she's not saying it to be funny. She's like, wheelchair for the eye. Like,
yeah, exactly. And so many with Jonah as well, like when they come into, they have a different point of view of everything, and that is where you find the comedy for sure. But yeah.
Yeah, so getting into Veep, I wonder if you agree. I try to break down structure, everything. That's what the show is about. I would say this really lacked a clear structure in terms of, a character has a goal. There's obstacles in the way of that one specific goal. We end in the resolution. I would say the pilot of Veep does not fit into a traditional 3-act comedy structure. No. Yet it's still successful. How do you think they're able to do that?
I think the structure of it does fit some traditional aspects as far as the hero's journey. Mm-hmm. Like Selena starts here with a need or a want, travels here is not right, travels there is not right, finds the middle ground. And to your point, that's where it stops. It's not built like a traditional pilot in the way in which a lot of network or even Netflix streaming stuff we see now. But what I do see is that it fits the HBO model for pilots.
Yes, let's talk about it. I feel like HBO is very different in terms of establishing pilots than other channels.
Yeah, I think I feel like every network has had their moment when they were the ones doing it. Like NBC in the 90s, they were really the standard bearer for like introducing a new pilot structure. HBO, right? Like in the 90s and the early aughts. Now we're seeing Hulu or FX, like really as a tentpole for this. Netflix as well in some regard. But the way in which they set things up, and again, this is more speculative, not definitive, but they want to introduce you, plop you into this world, make the world like the bigness or the largeness of the world. And for example, like I think Veep starts and it's literally in the middle of her running through her day. Yeah, they're just like
walking down the hallway. It's very, like you said, in the middle. It's not really a premise pilot where we would see, if it was a premise pilot, maybe on a network show, you'd probably see her running for president. You'd see her
talking to the president. I need you to do this. We would start there. It would feel more like West Wing.
Yes, or feel, like you're more building the world, but here we're just thrown in, this is how it is, and we have to sort of catch up and see what's going on.
Yeah, what is the world is like the first thing HBO is always setting you up, like whether it's Veep, Game of Thrones, Silicon Valley, they plop you into the world so you have an understanding of it. Then they plop in the introduction of all the characters. They may not introduce the desire and the need for exactly what the character may want for the season in the pilot, but they introduce you to all the main players, and then they introduce you to the tone. And that's all I think that Veep set out to do as a pilot was, we have a different specific tone, we have a new world, and here are our major players. Dan comes in, and Dan is the last one on the team that comes in, and that's Jonah, Dan, Sue, Amy, like all of them are gonna be your major players, Gary, for the entire show, right? All 7 seasons, but they're all introduced right there in the pilot. And I think the why now that a lot of writers would be like, well, so why, if this is the case, we're just plopping in? It's because she hires Dan. Yeah, and Dan is the last team member, so that's the why now, why we plop in there. But it sets up those things, and then again, just lets them run amok with the tone.
Yes, it's very much a tone world-building pilot, like you said. Sort of the city of Washington is a character in itself, and all the dealings and stuff they're forced to do. So basically we open with Selena. She's in the hallway. We learn that she wants to do this clean jobs initiative. That's her whole thing. And that sort of carries throughout the first season. That's her whole goal.
Styrofoams, plastics,
So she wants to have these cornstarch utensils. That's her whole thing. I'm going to have the clean jobs initiative. She thinks it's going to be good. But it ends up backfiring because she pisses off the plastics industry and then therefore oil industry because oil makes plastic. And it's sort of what she was trying to champion as her legacy. It just falls down immediately.
I also think, like, weirdly and subversively too, like, even the way in which you laid it out, it makes it clear that, like, it is a critique and, like, a satirization of politics in a way that, like, I'm thinking of when she has to do when she has to make that speech.
Oh, yeah.
And they're like, don't mention anything that will piss off the plastic
and it's
guy.
like all redacted, basically. The whole
hello
speech.
And thank you and proportions. And it's like hilarious because the thesis there is like, without special interests, they literally say nothing. They literally do nothing. And like, that is a sharp critique and just a super quick pointed joke, or, you know, like that they set up in the writing, but that's it. Like, I really do feel like Veep does an amazing job of figuring those types of things out and allowing there to be space, but when you look deeper, like, oh, it was built on something that was actually a really strong critique.
Yeah, and what I appreciate about it, it's not really criticizing one political party or one person. In fact, you don't really know what party Selena is in.
Yeah.
You don't know what she is.
Yeah.
and it's just, you don't, the characters that she's talking to, you don't know what party they are, the senators. It's just sort of a critique of the whole system.
That those who, we all think that those are the most powerful people, but if we got a snapshot into it, it's full of psychopaths and it's kind of pathetic, right? Like, and like, that's the flip of it. And you're right. I think it's much sharper without that. If they had mentioned Democrat or Republican in it, I'm sure most people would have turned it off. But a lot of people watched it, and a lot of people do watch it and rewatch it. So
that's very true. So she wants to do this Clean Jobs initiative. She goes to the that first event that she's going to. And I love this because it sets up her character very, very well, and Gary's character, when she's sort of walking around the room and she doesn't know who these people are, and Gary's like, oh, whispering every time someone comes up, oh, he likes maps. So then she comes and makes a map. Oh, you found us, I see. Like, it does a great job of establishing her as someone that doesn't really care about people. She doesn't know enough to actually remember who these people are. She has to have her aide constantly
letting her know literally as they approach her. But it's because she doesn't care about people. She cares about the pursuit of power.
Yes, all she does is care about power. Even the whole Clean Jobs initiative, she doesn't care. She's not trying to save the earth. Like, as soon as she figures out, oh, I pissed people off, oh, well, let me pivot. Like I'll do something else. Like, she has that
naked pursuit of power, no shame, which I feel like is when the pilot starts as 2012, is more foreshadowing for our political system than anything. And there's a lot of that. I feel like Veep and The Simpsons.
Yes.
And they're the similar camps, but like Veep and The Simpsons really get into the foreshadowing in an interesting and nuanced way.
Yeah, I was saying Veep sort of went viral during the last presidential election because it was like a scenario from Veep with like Kamala having to step in. Like, this was like a Veep plot.
It totally was a Veep plot. And like, I also think something that's super interesting is that like Veep had to up the ante and or figure out new things to say about politics as our politics was shifting. I mean, 2012 to 2019, it ran, and like how much politics has changed in that time. Like, it really had to be sharp, and I think that's a credit both to the writing but also to the actors.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So, yeah, she pisses off the plastic industry with her Clean Jobs initiative. Also a scene that I love is when she goes to meet with Senator Hollows. And that scene just does so much of establishing that these women don't really care about each other. It doesn't seem like anyone cares about each other in this world. I love when, Selena's saying to Senator Hollows, like, oh, your daughter Janet. And she's like, what? And she realized, oh, that's not the daughter's name. And she thinks, oh, Carol. And then even Senator Hollows like, oh, how are your kids? But Selena's like, my one kid is like, so it's like these people they clearly are co-workers, colleagues, but they don't care enough about each other to even know like their children's names.
Yes.
They only come to each other when they have to use each other to get what they want.
And I think too, like in a traditional pilot setup, or a network pilot setup, we may have seen, like we said, the president go and tell Selena, I need you to go to Senator Hollow's office and talk to her about this and get that. And then that's where she would meet Dan. No, how it happens is kind of like she falls into it. She meets Dan, and then Dan tells her kind of crudely and crashly, like, I would have done this differently and I would have done this differently. And it would have been a put off to me. It would have been put off to you. Everyone else would have rolled their eyes and walked away. But Selena, having value in someone who could strategize in a dirty way that can help her get power, that I feel like is the first act turn of the show, is that moment actually when she goes there and she speaks with Dan and they had that moment. That kind of kickstarts Selena thinking about
her machinations of, I need this sort of political animal. He's going to think like me.
Exactly.
This is the type of person I need on my team.
Exactly. And now I'm placing him in the center of it, which brings conflict with the others that are a part of my team. But also, he and I are working towards a goal that Amy is not working towards. Amy is working towards the goal of good governance.
Yeah.
Gary is working towards he's just dumb, but he's really good at his job and wants Selena to look good, but he doesn't realize it's in pursuit of a bashful or an unbashful desire to be powerful.
Yeah, I would say it's interesting because I would say all of the characters, if not all, most, are very widely unlikable on the show. Like, all of the people.
It's a show about politics.
Yes,
I feel like that's
they're like
fitting.
very unlikable, but yet the show as a whole, you do like it.
Yeah.
How do you think they're able to accomplish creating a show where everyone is so unlikable, but not having the viewer turned off? Or
Well, I'll ask you too, as a writer, you've probably gotten in your writing the notes sometimes, like this character is not likable, or this character, I didn't really root for them. And like, I always resented or hated some version of that note, because I think the best characters represent things that are real in us. And oftentimes when I see something that I don't like in someone else, it's a reflection of the things I don't like in myself, right? I think that all of them reflect things that we may not like, but we know to be true. And we know to be true about politicians, which is why we think it's funny, because it's satirical and laughing at them, and that we're in on the joke, where normally we're on the outside of power.
Yeah, I think that's 100% spot on, especially about getting the note about, they're not likable. I don't think that we have to make characters that are likable. I think we need to make characters that are realistic, and I can understand their actions even if I don't agree with them or like them. It makes sense for a character in that sort of climate to do it.
Yeah, we want characters' motivations to be clear, not for you to agree with the motivations. I think is a spot on. And I think too that, and you can tell me too for your writing, that like, I will write a character and think it's the hero, and then by the end of actually finishing maybe my second or third pass, realize like, this is not the protagonist, this is the antagonist, and write the other one from a different space. And then when people read it, someone may like this character, someone may like that character, and that is actually a way more interesting conversation than good and likable and bad and not likable, you know?
Yeah, I think sort of the most memorable characters are complex, like
Walter White.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even I just watched Sex and the City for the first time. I never watched the show until a few months ago. Well, it was pretty good. I see why people like it.
Yeah.
But I am convinced Carrie is the villain of that show. Carrie, I'm like, this bitch, she's very annoying.
They kind of always played it more like it was Samantha, right?
Yeah. I feel like Carrie is an asshole, though. And I feel like, as an adult, I feel like if I think I was a teenager when this show came out. That was part of the reasons, like, I don't find this relatable.
Yeah.
a teenager.
We were living in 2003
I was a virgin.
New York City.
I was not having sex. I was not in the city. I was in my bedroom.
I was doing math in the suburbs. This is
not relatable. But as an adult, I feel like if I was in my 20s, maybe I would be like, oh yeah, Carrie's cool. Yeah. But as in my 30s, I'm like, Carrie's the problem.
Yeah, Carrie needs some therapy.
Yes, she is the issue.
All right, so I have a question for you then. Another show that's similar vibes to Sex and the City, but Insecure.
Yeah, Issa.
Is Issa
I don't think Issa's the
hero?
villain. Well, she cheated on Lawrence. Let's not.
She cheated on Lawrence. She had things with everybody.
Yeah,
Molly,
I feel like she was a problem. Molly was annoying, but Issa, she was always just like didn't have her shit together. Yeah. I think she was a problem. She was a villain. She was a villain.
Yeah, when you look at it like on paper, if I just wrote down things she did, you're like, oh, this is the bad person.
I agree. And I think she shouldn't have been with Lawrence in the end. I'm sorry. I wanted her to be with the Lyft driver.
Well, she had so many too. She had like Nathan too.
I liked him. Yeah. Even the dude she cheated on Lawrence with.
In the first season.
Yeah, I felt bad for him. He sort of just got used and abused.
Yes.
Issa, the problem. I agree. But yeah, back to Veep.
Yeah.
So after, she goes to see Senator Hollow, she's intrigued by Dan. Yeah. Jonah pops up. That's when we first meet him.
Jonah Ryan.
I feel like all the characters have such memorable intros that perfectly sort of sum up who they are. And Jonah is no exception to that.
Yeah. Jonah is really a lightning rod character for the series because I think he has the... Selena does a lot of like the naked pursuit of power stuff and like the grossness of that, but he really brings the satirical aspect of like satirizing the conservative and or like, I guess at the time it was Tea Party type, like frustration that was a part of politics, like the xenophobic, the small government, but I think his biggest, something that was hidden in the pilot, and I don't even think the writers maybe knew what they were doing at the time, is his inability to feel shame.
Oh, yeah.
The whole time he's like shamelessly trying to go out with Amy, like from the get-go of the show.
Yeah.
And like that ends up being a huge characteristic of why the show is so good at satirizing politics, is because now we're to a point where politicians do not know any shame.
No.
And like he was the seeding of that, like them making that joke about it.
Yeah.
But it's very clear through him and Amy, that back and forth is hilarious. And he's like, do you like in the Italian restaurant? I love Italian, but I still
don't like you.
I still don't like you. Yeah. Great. Yeah.
No, that's great. And so he comes and it's basically like the president doesn't want to attend this fundraiser because he's afraid about answering some questions. So Veep, you have to do that. And she's like, I'm busy, but no one cares that she's busy. And it's sort of, I think sort of Selena's whole thing, like you said, she just wants power so badly. And to be in this position as a vice president where you're like this close to power, but you really have no power.
You're the closest to power, but you're the least powerful person in the room. I mean, like, think about our vice presidents. Al Gore, like, even Joe Biden, like, during Barack Obama, like Mike Pence, like literally have no power to even keep yourself safe at some points, yet you are the closest to power, which is like the Veep position is gotta be one of those
very frustrating
jobs.
So you understand, like Selena is very self-serving, very just selfish, very wanting to do things for herself, but then you sort of understand that no one really takes her seriously and she just wants to be taken,
seriously.
Yeah,
exactly. And I feel like, again, that's a little bit of all of our politicians, right? Like, it's like there's an aspect of their, like, even when we look at their origin stories where I'm like, oh, you were bullied and like not taken seriously, and now everyone has to take you seriously. But yeah, like Selena is tragic in that way because I think too, without that insecurity of like not being taken seriously, I'm not even sure she would live in the United States.
No, I feel like you wouldn't pursue that power. I feel like the only people that are pursuing things are usually the people that shouldn't have it, to be honest.
I say that again, amen to that. Like, I love that.
Yeah, if you were, someone that was complete in themselves, who was really altruistic, you wouldn't even be in that arena probably.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about literally in the history how John Adams wanted to be president so bad, and Thomas Jefferson didn't want him to be president so bad because he wanted it so badly. Mm-hmm. That created this huge rivalry for like ever. And Thomas Jefferson, one of his famous quotes is like, yeah, the person who least wants to be president should be president, as like a slight to John Adams across the hall. Like,
that's true.
Yeah.
Dumbledore said something close that's as well.
Yeah. Look at art showing history.
It is true. So at this sort of speech that she's supposed to give for the president, he doesn't want to be there. Like you said, all the stuff about the plastics is redacted, so she can't really give a speech. She's nervous. She's floundering up there. And, she says something offensive that we don't need to say.
Deeply offensive.
But she's very offensive on stage. She's sort of shocked, and everyone's going into like damage control mode. Watching this show, I was just struck by this show is wildly offensive. And to me, I like that. Like, I think it's hilarious. I'm not offended. But, you hear all these things about the current state of comedy and how you can't make certain jokes. Do you think that this show, this pilot specifically, would be able to air like today or no?
That is a great question. Yeah. I think that if this show like this was aired today, it actually would be popular and it would be exciting, but it's because we don't see many of these types of shows anymore. And I think that, unfortunately, like, a lot of programmers don't have the bravery to air something like this, right? Like, it used to be like, okay, well, here's a little address at the bottom of the screen you can send all your hate mail to, Now it's like they don't want to have to deal with that bad publicity. But I do think that, again, it's funny because it recognizes something in all of us that's real. Mm-hmm. Like, they're saying offensive things, but they're also saying things that people would say if cameras weren't around, right?
And we all laugh at it. So what does that say about us?
Exactly. It summed up perfectly, right? Like, it recognizes something that's real in humanity, and those things will always be successful. I think you've been in the writer's room. That's the core of our job. It's like figuring out how we can reflect what is real out there and people are going through today to give them some understanding of both the meaning of what they're going through, but also that they're not alone going through it, right? And like sometimes when you say an offensive joke, it's scary because you don't know if you're going to offend, or like Selena, like she recycles Senator's joke and like Senator made everybody laugh. She recycles it doesn't, which is like the number one rule in the comedy room too, like no joke stealing for that reason.
Well, that's the type of person Selena is, a joke stealer.
Yeah, but no, I think that this type of show would be successful, but I'm not sure it would get made.
That's valid. I feel like, so Jesse Armstrong, the creator of Succession, also was a writer on Veep. But I feel like Succession is a similar vein where you have these wildly offensive people. It's a satire, doing crazy stuff. But that show was super popular. And I think Succession, they were doing some saying wild stuff on that show. Yeah. So sometimes I think, though I do think, yes, there's more pushback against comedy, I think that there's still space to push the envelope. I think you just need to be funny. Like, if the joke doesn't land, then it doesn't matter.
And it needs to be fresh, right? Like, if you're recycling tropes and stereotypes that are, at this point, hundreds of years old, it's not that we're canceling you because you said it. We're canceling you because it's not funny, right? And like, I also feel like there's an aspect of wanting to push back on new voices being added to the sphere of talk of like just public discourse. And like, you are allowed to say whatever you want in this country, but I'm also allowed to respond to it, right? And like that is the pushback we're seeing because with social media, with the internet, even just with like the way in which we live our lives in a digital plane, people have the ability to now speak back to power. And that is the thing
That's true. They're not used to that.
The comedian is used to hearing either laughs or silence. He's not used to going home and reading, your joke fucking sucked because X, Y, and Z on Twitter. And like, I think that if you're gonna be a part of entertainment, especially comedy, you have to have tough enough skin to deal with that, you know? So.
It's a fair point. Fair point. So as a result of Selena's, distasteful joke, she goes and meets with the head of this sort of mental disability charity.
It's just somebody get him in there.
But it's funny because she really has no remorse for what she said at all. In fact, she uses the slur multiple times. Like, she does not care. I misjoked.
I didn't misspeak. I misjoked.
She does not care. She's just annoyed that this has inconvenienced her rather than being truly sorry about like offending people. Which would
have been the easier and cleaner kill, true. Right? Like it would have been to just like hear those, take it in, take ownership and apologize. But yet, because they refuse to do that, they have to jump through hoops.
Exactly. And so at that is the same moment Jonah returns and has the card for Senator Reeve, who is an unpopular senator who just died. Yeah. And that whole bit about him being a rapist, they call him Rapey Reeves. Like, I think there was a joke where they were like, oh, is he full of wisdom? And she said, oh, he's full of bourbon. Yeah. And like the fact that this was clearly molester type dude died and they're all forced to pretend that he was some great person, knowing that he was really just like an assaulter.
What did Jonah say? Like when the biggest pervert on Capitol Hill dies, you sign the card for his widow.
And it's funny because it's true. Like think of how these horrible people die in government and we're all just supposed to forget their past misdeeds because they held this whatever position. All is forgiven and they were a great man.
Yeah, I think that is still something that our society is like coming to grips on. How do we both like not throw out the baby with the bathwater with some good this person may have done, but also like take the totality? I've been thinking about that recently. I was just thinking like, and not in like a morbid way, but I was like, when I go, I want at my funeral, not just talk about the good shit I did, like talk about the bad shit too.
Oh, really?
Because that might help somebody out there, and I'm dead. True. You ain't gonna hurt my feelings, right? Like,
very true.
So somebody's like, well, he wasn't perfect, but he was good. I can be good too without being perfect, Because, and they be digging deep to find good stuff for some people. They be like, he's elementary school. Like, nah. Just say the dirt he did, too, so we can all take something from this.
That's true. And I do think that in our society, we have a tendency to sort of, whatever mistakes people make, you want to amplify it and paint that person as like, oh, they're canceled. They did this. But what about all the good stuff they did? I feel like humans are complex. In my opinion, the older I get, the more I realize I'm like, there's not a good person. There's not a bad person. I think we're just the sum total of our actions. Yeah. Even the worst person that does horrible things, somebody
has done something nice for somebody's grandma.
They've done something nice, yeah. The best person, they've done something shady.
Yeah.
So it's more just like, I don't know, the older I get, the more I just don't care. I forgive people and realize it's not that deep. Like, whatever someone's doing to you is usually not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of whatever happened to them.
100%. No, I love that.
Deep moments on the podcast.
Yeah, sometimes we get deep. Not a lot of times in the writer's room, but sometimes.
So, so they bring the card over. Mm-hmm. Selena's busy. She tells Amy to sign her name on the card. Yeah. Amy mistakenly signs her own name instead of the name for the president. So then they have to get it back. And so this is what I meant about the
pilot structure.
Yeah, the untraditional structure. It just seems like instead of one goal being tracked and proven, it's just like more things keep mounting and mounting, which I do think maybe speaks to the nature of, working in politics.
Yeah, I think it definitely speaks to the nature of politics. And that's not something I had considered. But I think, when you're building that world, you want that world to resemble the craziness of like, it could go this way, it could go that way. The wind could blow any way in direction in politics, and they have to deal with that, and they have to deal with how people feel about that. I also think, too, that, like, again, it's not a typical structure that we're used to, especially, like, if we were comparing it to a network. A network would have kept the singular problem at the center and had our character revolve around it and find, oh, I'm on the left side of it. No, I'm not on. Now I'm on the right side of it. No. This one, I feel like, is more true to form, but also fits a hero's journey. The hero goes from place to place. Generally, in like network pilots, they're dealing with one, and I'm thinking about a procedural even, like they're dealing with one problem. But to your point, that's not how life is. I could be on the way to fixing this problem and another problem arise, and but the hero's journey is taking me to a new place. Not the same problem. Now I'm here, now I'm there, now I'm here. And that feels like what their group was on more.
Yeah, and I do think there's still a lot of conflict in the episode. It's very heightened conflict, and conflict is really story. So even though there's not one central goal, it doesn't feel like boring, or it doesn't feel like it's meandering in sort of way where you don't understand what the show is. Because there is so much conflict going back and forth with Selena, with her staff members, with everyone. It doesn't feel, I would say, stagnant, even though it's not progressing in sort of a linear
And I
way.
think, too, what's good for us writers to understand, too, is that, especially in TV, you are burying seeds that may blossom in episode 8 or may blossom in episode 6. And, allowing yourself to have pockets where you can put seeds in your pocket for those moments, is important. I'm forgetting the staffer's name, the one that has the dog.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, I got to go back and feed the dog. And she's like, okay, go home, feed the dog, walk the dog, shoot the dog. I don't care what you do, and then be back here. And he's like, the dog will survive. Later, we realized that he had made up this fake dog years ago to get out of things, right? And it's just buried in him being like, I gotta go take care of my dog, and her being like, no, and being like, okay, I'll stay. Feels like Selena's forcing everyone to stay overtime, and but it's a setup for a B story in episode 5 or 6. And I think that is beautiful. That is beautiful pilot writing that I'm not sure if it was present in the beginning or they went back and retrofitted.
Maybe that was one of the improv jokes.
Yeah.
And then they made a plot out of it.
They run out of it. Or some writer came back and was like, I know I've been that, come in midway through the season, there was this one joke 3 episodes ago, and I think we can turn this into a story.
Those are my favorite type of shows. My favorite show of all time, comedy show, is probably Arrested Development.
Oh, wow.
And
Allison Jones did casting for this and that.
That's why my man Buster.
Yes.
Buster Blue.
Yes.
But
Buster and
that show is the best show to me because like you said, there's jokes that don't pay off for seasons, or they're just running jokes that keep going on for seasons, like the episode when
the brother and the sister,
yes,
they're about to hook up for 4 episodes. Everyone's like, what?
It's a good show. Or when Tobias is in the Blue Man group, and then literally the rest of the season, you'll just see random blue handprints in the back because it was the whole thing where he couldn't get the makeup off, so he just leaves it on at all times. Because he might have to pop in for a show. And so, to me, awesome. That's great comedy writing is when you have these running jokes, and sort of the whole show felt like an inside joke, really.
Yes, yeah.
And you see some of that in Veep, too.
I also think, though, too, I'm glad, outer side of it as an audience member, I feel the same way. Like those are the greatest things. But in the writer's room too, like when we have those and we find those things or someone brings a joke back from a long time ago, we would clap at Grownish. We would be like, wow, like, you feel great for like 2 weeks. You don't get a joke on the script, but you felt great. Like,
no, you should. You should. It's hard to do. It's a hard job.
Yeah.
So when Gary is tasked with to go steal the card back from Jonah so Selena can sign the correct card, and he goes, and of course Jonah spots him, and he uses this opportunity to be like, I'll give you the card back if you get me a date with Amy.
Yes.
So Gary's like, well, what do I look like, a pimp? And he's like, yeah, you do kind of look like a pimp because he's wearing the bright red coat that belongs to Sue.
Yeah, he's wearing Sue's coat, so he does.
So, Amy does not want to do this. Yes. She does not want to be pimped out. Selena does not care. This is also showing what type of person Selena is. She's gonna pimp out her own staff member.
And like to point to the senator, like, I really don't care about these other women I work with at all.
No, does not care. She's like, get over it. Like, you don't even have to have sex with him. I was married for 12 years. It just sounds like my marriage, pretty much. Like, does not care. She really has no sympathy for. It's like, this must be done because it affects me.
And also, too, on top of it, like, Jonah doesn't just want to go out with Amy to be with Amy. He's like, Amy is an 8, and I want other 8s to see me out with 8s so I can get 8s. And it's like...
the logic of that.
Just always the grift, always the scam or the scheme is both coloring of the political world, coloring of Jonah as a character, and also burying more seeds for later in the series,
Yeah, but the fact, Jonah just says that. Even if you're thinking that, like, what kind of person is, the fact that he says that out loud is like, I know she's not going to date me, but she's an 8. The other 8s will see me. Boom, I'm dating another 8. Like... just wild.
And it's such grade school. Yeah. Like, I don't think I've had that thought past high school. Even to college, I was like, immature.
I don't know if women sit around like, oh, I saw him get an 8. He's suddenly acceptable. Does that work?
And also, the type of person you are attracting with that logic is a bad...
But he doesn't care. None of these people care. The thing is, they're all users. They're all two-faced. Like, the number of times in this pilot where someone says something and then turns around and just like contradicts what they just like the fakeness and double speak is astounding from Selena. Even that moment where, Gary's like, oh, I'll get you those European sweeteners. She's like, thanks, love them. And I hate those things. Like, why you just...
whatever she said.
There's so many moments where people are just like going back on what they said, or even the scene where Dan is sort of berating Gary when he doesn't know how to use the Keurig machine, and he's like
open it up, put the pot in.
He just like berating this man, and then it's a direct cut to Selena saying, well, Dan seems nice. Like,
and she's like, Dan is a shit on top of a shit, like,
yeah, it's just like all these people are awful.
And Selena can't see it because she can only see that Dan can help her get power.
Yes. Yeah. And so, they get the card back, but then they realize, oh, the president has already signed this card. We need a new card, but who's going to forge the president's signature? And everyone's freaking out.
It's the felony.
Yeah, Sue's like, you can get like literally electrocuted for this. This is not cool. But then Dan just comes in, boom, boom,
turn it upside down.
Yeah, and it was crazy because that revealed his type of character, where everyone else they're awful too, but they won't go that far, and he has no hesitation, just comes in and makes me think, has he been doing this before? Like, this was very sketchy.
Again, like, great coloring and character building. Like, we know Dan has no morals. We know Selena and him are in that camp together. We know Amy and the other staffers are in another camp of wanting to serve and be good, and Gary is just dumb, and like other staffers are just dumb, and like he can't figure out the Keurig because he's just dumb, like it's just put it in, like it's all like coloring those things in a really subtle way, which is beautiful.
Yeah, and then Dan, reveals that he's quit working for the senator. More than that, he sets up the senator to sort of take the fall for Selena's mistake in saying the offensive term. She's like, oh no, she goaded you. She goaded you into saying that. So this is the type of person who'll just flip on a dime. Like, he was working for the senator, dating the senator's daughter. And from what we see, the senator treats him reasonably well. Like, she's not doing anything bad, but he sees the opportunity to get more power. So he just ditches his boss, ditches the daughter. He breaks up with her in a text because
all foreshadowing.
Yes.
Yeah, him with Selena, leaving Selena,
exactly,
and dating Selena, his daughter. Yeah.
He's very shady, and that's what Amy says. Like, he's shady. Selena said, "Oh, I've hired him." And she's like, "What? Like, he's horrible. I just told you he's a bastard." And Selena's like, "Well, I speak bastard. I'm fluent in bastard,
and I need someone who's gonna go deeper than I will, so I don't have to get my hands dirty."
Yes, and Selena seems to think like, "Oh, I used him to get what I wanted," and Amy's like, "No, he used you. Like, what are you talking about? You think you used him? He just got what he wanted, like a job here."
Yeah.
And Selena, I think that's also part of her downfall. She's so, I guess, yes. I think she thinks she's smarter than everyone, even though she's clearly not. But like, she can't even fathom that she would have been the one that got tricked.
Yeah.
She thinks, oh, I'm doing the tricking. No, you just got tricked, but you're so like self-obsessed, you don't even see that.
That is like all of us, right? Like, we'd be like, I got over on that person, not knowing like, or like, I'm thinking of myself too, where I'm like, oh, I drove over here and I got the cheaper gas and I wasted just as much gas to go to that other place. Like, they didn't get over on me. Like, I'm still a part of the system very much and being milked in my own way.
Very true. So Veep, like I said, very interesting in terms of structure, but I think it gets the job done. I think also sort of ending on Dan working for her, and Dan's sort of shady. It really makes you want to keep watching to see, like, is this guy going to do something to her? Yeah,
what's going to happen? And again, like, I think that it's successful even though it doesn't fit the conventions, because it does the basic things that shows need to do. Build out a world that's interesting, introduce the characters, and introduce the tone in a way in which the audience will get it. And I think particularly they do a really fascinating job of doing all three of those things. I think writing, highlighting the characters and their motivations, how they'll do. But I think directing too, leaning into aspects of building out a world without building a huge budget. We didn't see them on Capitol Hill. We didn't see them in the Rotunda. We saw them in an office, and we saw 1 or 2 motorcades, which is just renting out black vehicles and extras to do that. And I thought it still makes it feel like a big, expensive HBO show. But I know at the time that Veep is not this big, super expensive HBO show. It's the lead-in or the postlude to the Thrones or the Sopranos and all these types of stuff. You know what I'm saying? Or I think Sopranos is done by the time, but Thrones at that time, And so it can't be super expensive, but they still do a good job of building out that world through the shading of the characters and through small directing choices.
Yeah, I think that's actually an excellent point. On a previous episode, I was talking to someone about writing something as a sample versus writing something that is going to be produced. And often as writers, we have to, think about producibility and things get cut. Like, I remember an episode I wrote for The Witcher. was supposed to take place in a cathedral, and my boss was like, yeah, to get this establishing shot of a cathedral, it's gonna cost $400,000 just for like
Just
this,
for the establishing shot.
And so she's like, oh, we can't do that. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And they moved it to a garden, which
Is the garden at the cathedral, right?
Yeah, so you
Beautiful.
think about like producibility and how you said, even though this show is set in the White House, we don't actually see the White House.
No.
We don't see any of those expensive establishers that would drive up the cost to ridiculous amounts. They can just be in any room, anywhere,
Yes.
frankly, you know?
And even they use it to bring plot in, right? Like she shows up to talk to the guys and there's not a lot of people there at that fundraiser, at that thing she's supposed to show up to. You're imagining if a vice president shows up to something, there's going to be hundreds of people there. And they use it to their advantage to show up there's 13 people there. That's producible and also like an ability to build into the plot. The fact that it does look bad and not big is a part of it, you know? And that's playing chess instead of checkers, I think.
No, I think
that's the showrunner and the producers.
That was very good. And my last thing, so I didn't know this, but I was researching the show, that the creator, Armando Iannucci, he basically made a UK version of this show called The Thick of It, I think it was called.
Correct.
About the UK politics. And Veep is sort of the American take on that.
Yes.
I think Americans, we have a history of making British versions of things. Why do you think that? Just Americans, we love British comedies and sort of, I think of The Office, I think of this show. I think Friends was even a British show.
Really?
I believe so.
I didn't know.
Why do we like them so much?
Another excellent question. I think it has to do with just more about American and British culture and their relationships and less about TV. I think that from some of my travels, I've learned the stereotypes of Americans. And like one is that someone said like, Americans are kind and polite to a fault to being fake. They'll say, yes, everything is fine when everything is not fine. Where like a German will say, everything is not fine.
That's true.
And I think the British humor is a little bit, like we were talking about before, crass, out there, will say offensive things as commonplace. And like the comedy is how everyone is dealing with that thing being introduced. The offensive joke or the thing being said or the crashness or the rudeness of a character. And that means that the British culture in some ways always a little bit ahead, a little bit more naked, a little bit more on the forefront of that, and we're catching up to it. So I think maybe that there's an aspect of that goes into why British shows are like a little bit one step ahead in these comedic ways, and then they become hits in America because we're kind of like, now it's palpable, right? Like now we can say that we've seen it there, now we can bring it here and, you know, slowly but surely open up the same contradictions that everybody sees. But that's kind of a
British shows.
You know?
I'm a big fan.
I'm a huge fan of like British like dramas though.
Oh, I like them all. If you like a British drama, have you seen Grantchester?
No, I haven't seen Grantchester.
It's a good one. It's a few years old now, but it's about this like, he's not a priest. He's like I think a vicar, which is like a type of church official.
Yeah.
And
like
it's in like the 1940s.
Okay.
And he like teams up with this policeman and they're solving crimes. But it's good. Grantchester.
I'm going to write that down. I need to check this out.
I love Downton Abbey.
Yeah,
that's one of my faves.
I did too.
Love that
Which
one.
is like not my world at all. And everyone's like, you like the show? I'm like, it's a preview
so
to a
good.
show, a world I do not know.
It's so good. That's a good show.
My favorite show, probably in the last 5 years, Killing Eve.
Oh, I haven't watched it yet. I know people love that show.
It is a love story. I just thought it was an interesting love story because it's non-romantic love story. It's about getting obsessed with one's work and obsessed with other people at work in a weird way.
Okay, I heard good
And then
things.
it's just super dope connection between two female leads. I never watched so much TV and so many storylines that did not center or talk about men.
I love that.
That was cool.
That's my fave.
That was really cool. It was cool. It was like, you go a couple episodes and be like, they ain't talking about their husband.
Yes.
They ain't talking about no boyfriend. They
It's
ain't talking about no
very
daddy
irritating.
issues. It's just about their relationship, which I found refreshing.
That is refreshing. As a woman writer, like, I never write about that stuff. Like, I just don't care. It doesn't find interest to me. I feel like every show about a woman, it's always like the
Revolves.
first episode is, my man broke up with me, or I need to find a man. I don't care. Like,
Yeah, why is that like with the men, it's like, I need to pay my rent. And the woman, it's like, my man broke up
that's
with me. It's like,
you're right. I feel like
all
that's
that,
the
like,
pilot of
yeah.
every
the guy's like, oh, I lost
You
my
broke
job. As a man, I've lost my, like, you know, like, I'm told through society I'm supposed to provide, and now I can't do the thing that society tells me. A woman, on the other hand, I'm told I'm supposed to be a woman who's a wife and a mother, and now I don't have a partner. How am I supposed to fulfill?
Man,
Boo.
that's deep. I agree. I don't write about those things.
Good.
Never have. Never will.
Good.
And if they do have a man, it's like the background. Like, that's not really the point. I don't like, I just find it repetitive, reductive. That was also refreshing about Veep is she's not talking about that.
The president all the time.
No, and even in the show, she's not. I feel like it could have been reducted to be like, she's the first female. Well, I don't know in this world, maybe she's not the first one. I don't know. But especially during the time that it came out, I think that was around the time like Hillary ran for president.
Yeah.
That could have been the focus of the show, but they don't even really address it at all.
No.
It's just, she's a woman, she's a vice president, whatever. It's not.
And even later in seasons, when she does become the first female president in that world, I think for a little bit of time they touch on it, but then it's right back to the politics of it, which is nice. I think hopefully too, like when more stories like the ones you'll be telling, talking about things in a fresh way, in a nuanced way, in a different way, can show people that like we don't have to follow the same conventions. And if we can not follow the same conventions, maybe we can affect society in a new way.
Yes. I never write about a woman needing a man.
Good.
I don't care. Okay, so thank you for talking about Veep with me. Would you like to stay and answer a couple questions about writing?
I'm down to stay and answer some questions. Let's do it.
Stand by.
Okay, so Rickey, you have had the pleasure of working on network shows, cable show, streamers, which are all very different in the terms of how things are ran. So could you just talk about the differences in terms of like the writing and production schedule? How is working in those environments different?
Yeah, I had not realized I had worked in these three separate spaces. But yeah, that's cool. I think the biggest difference is network is a huge ship and it runs on a tight schedule and it don't stop for nobody. It will eat you up before it stops, right? So like 11 weeks on Keenan or something like that, we're going to finish it in 11 weeks. It's going to be done in 11 weeks no matter what. I think that those schedules just like, I'm thinking too slightly a little bit about Grownish, where like we don't get behind on the script. We finish the script because we got to shoot it on Monday. Because we got to shoot it on Monday or else we won't be done on Friday. And if we ain't done on Friday, we ain't going to start the next episode on Monday, right? So like those things are like that. But when I worked on a streamer, we wrote the whole season and then they went off and shot it. So one, we were able to like bring new things up and like really connect, almost write it like a movie and split it up in that way. But also too, like we knew we could take 10 days on episode 2 because we might only have to take 4 days on episode 5. And as such, like it was a lot loosier-goosier type situation in the writer's room. And ultimately too, I think the streamer the streamers understand that like they are getting something that may feel more niche, and network is getting something that may feel more general. And as such, in network, we always have to have a bunch of alts, right? Mm-hmm. We don't know what could be offensive in a year, right? We don't know what could be bad, crazy. Right? So we have to get a bunch of alts. But the streamers, like, we know you're weird, and we know that only 20 people are gonna watch this, but we want them to love this shit. So that was the difference, I think, the energy that came down from the top. There was things on the streamer, I'd be like, they're never gonna let us do that. And they were like, can you just take the F word out? And we're like, oh yeah, for sure. They're like, we'll take it out right now. I think that was the biggest difference from my point of view as a producer level.
Okay, yeah, so it just seems like streamer, you just have more time and more sort of openness to do what you want to do.
Yeah, for sure.
Makes sense. So here's a controversial question. I would say you're someone that writes comedy. Mm-hmm. I write comedy. I've had people before ask me how to write a joke. And I guess, you can give a mechanical sort of answer, but I'm sort of thinking in my head, if you have to ask me that, you probably shouldn't be writing jokes. Like, maybe you might want to get a different job.
Yeah.
So do you think that you can teach people to be funny, or is it just something innate, or is it a skill that you learn?
I think you can teach people to be funny. I think that I always found intelligence and humor to be a one with each other, right? And like, you can teach someone and help make someone smarter or more intelligent through like knowledge. I think humor is similar. When you understand some principles, you just get smarter and funnier. For example, quicker is funnier. Like, I am not, I ain't. I ain't is just even funnier than I am not, right? And I think when you understand like things like that, you just naturally become a little funnier, and those are small things you can teach. A joke, like, it just depends. Like, a knock-knock joke, like, super easy, mechanical, easy peasy, may not be funny. A more complex joke with a point of view to start, a contradiction, and then a punchline at the end is going to be a little more complex. But I think people can learn to do those things. They have those certain conventions, like, what's quicker is funnier, less shoe leather, physical comedy can save the day. If someone says a punchline, someone has to deliver a straight line to them, right? Like, those little things, for sure, people can. And we often on set are teaching actors who may not or be trained in comedy to be comedic. And like, I'm thinking of Grownish and I'm thinking of Blackish and Grownish. There were some where we were like, you're not a comic, but you're good at this because you understand the convention of what we're doing. Oh, Diane understands the point of view, so she's delivering it hilariously, whereas you put somebody else there and they may not, I definitely believe for sure you can teach someone to be funny.
Okay, you've changed my mind, because I didn't think so.
I'm thinking too about...
Well, I think everything you said is true.
And I'm thinking like Gary Shandling, who like is one of the like goats. And he like sat in comedy clubs in his 20s and late 20s. Not even like, he was a writer on Sanford and Son, and then went and sat in comedy clubs and did it like math problems. This plus this equals a funny joke. This plus this equals not so funny joke. I'm going to switch these things up. And he talks about it in his like documentary. Like, he taught himself to be funny, and like was one of the funniest. Like, the Larry Saunders show is like gold,
Wow, okay, that's good. So keep hope alive, unfunny people. You can learn.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Rickey, for talking all things Veep. Our term is over, just like Selena's.
Yes.
But it was great to talk to you.
I had a great time, so thank you for having me.
Of course, anytime. Thanks again to our guest, Rickey Larke, to the creator of Veep, Armando Iannucci, and of course to you for tuning into the podcast. Now, if you loved this episode, please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. You can watch the video on YouTube, or you can listen to the audio on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I'd love if you'd follow us on Instagram at InTheCutLA and check out our website, inthecutla.org, for more resources. Until next time, stay in the cut.